You're a former interrogator and used to debrief hostages, whether that's downed aircrew or troops captured behind enemy lines. We're assuming here that the second crew member of the US F-15E has ejected and is situated somewhere inside Khuzestan province, which is in Iran, and it's on the border of Iraq. What are the protocols that crew member will be deploying to avoid capture?
Well, first and foremost, Mikey, he or she will want to get rid of any kit they can get rid of, and if they get the chance, to bury it if the ground so allows them to do that. In addition to that, what in regards to themselves, their whole persona will be extremely heightened in terms of adrenaline, their hearing, sight, smell, because what they'll be doing is wanting not to engage with anybody whatsoever. So although they'll be heading, in this case, hopefully due west, what they need to remember is that they need to stay out of harm's way. And if we think back to the first Gulf War, and Mr. McNabb and Bravo 20, what gave them away straight away was the goat herder. So it's very important that that individual, he or she, manages to stay completely out of sight, if at all possible.
Now, the first crew member, the Combat Search and Rescues found the first crew member, and we don't know whether it's the pilot or the weapon systems operator. They found the first crew member within roughly about 12 hours. What's hindering the detection and extraction by the Combat Search and Rescue crews of the second crew member?
Well, first and foremost, we don't know if the beacon itself is operational. Was it serviceable in the first place? Was it damaged when he or she exited the aircraft? Or was it damaged on landing? It's important to remember also that certain powers have the ability to hand information to Iran to get round that encryption. So it's very, very important to remember that in terms of that extraction, the longer it goes on, also the greater the Iranian forces are going to flood into that area to seek out this individual, whoever he or she is.
And are there any scenarios where the second crew member could have been captured, but the Iranians aren't letting on to that?
Well, yes. The Iranians, no doubt, want to find this individual if they already haven't done so. Because if I put my nasty head on, I will have kept saying, yes, we can't find this individual whatsoever, because what they will do, or might have the capability to do, is fire that beacon in, draw the American forces in to take them out as well. So that's important to remember that. They're not going to play to any rules of letting this person, he or she, just get away scot-free.
So you're saying there's a scenario where they could have actually captured the second individual,
Correct.
But then they'll turn that beacon on, which will then draw in additional combat search and rescue forces
They
from
could
the US.
turn the whole scenario on its head.
Wow. So the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, they're obviously going to be placing a huge priority on finding this second crew member. What tactics will their hunter force be using in order to facilitate that?
Well, they'll be using all the available manpower, but in particularly drones, dogs, vehicles of any sort, and also they'll be firing up the locals in the area to go out themselves, because they'll be well versed in the local area where people can hide, secrete themselves. So they'll be using all the assets they can do to locate this person, whoever he or she is.
And we've also got the Basij forces, the voluntary militia force, if you like, which scale up to hundreds of thousands on a wartime footing, potentially millions. So I'm assuming they might be involved as well.
Absolutely, Mikey, because they'll be going all out to try and locate this person, whoever he or she is, because it's a huge coup for them if they do so.
Now, I remember when I was operating over Baghdad, we were trained in conduct after capture. That was operating in an urban environment. What does conduct after capture look like potentially for this second crew member?
Well, as with anybody who's captured, they're going to suffer first and foremost from the shock of capture. But the training they should have gone through, and that refresher training they should have gone through, should have heightened their awareness to the pressures they'll be under, self and system induced. And if they will be interrogated without doubt. But as I always like to say and use the term, say whatever you want, but whatever you say nothing. They will try to remain solid, as we say, stand on the island. I cannot answer that question, sir, depending on what that question is, because what the Iranians will be trying to do is trip that person up for the hope that they're going to elicit some information that's useful to them.
And what type of techniques will the Iranians be using to kind of wear that person down?
Well, they could be using isolation. The torture is probably put to one side because that elicits nothing. So they'll be using isolation, they'll be using hunger, they'll be using
Sleep deprivation.
sleep deprivation, but also an individual who's asked to stand or sit for a long time in certain stress positions. That will again wear that person down. And added into that, of course, the individual themselves will be greatly, suffering, if you like, potentially from their own self and system-induced pressures. And that can be many, and some of them can be quite wild, because when you are in that position, of course, you're isolated. So in terms of your own mind, you could be then going back through your own life, wondering what you or he or she should have done better. As I used to say, forget it, it's done, it's over with. So stay positive, think what you're going to say, think about your surroundings around you, and look for those opportunities to push back where needed.
And what type of information, if the scenario is that the IRGC, the Iranians, have captured this second crew member, what type of information will they be looking to get from that person?
Well, they'll be looking for their modus operandi. They'll be looking at how they operate, what future plans, if any, which I doubt anybody's going to, or that individual's going to allude to, because any such plans, whatever, will have been immediately changed in terms of codes. Anything like that whatsoever will have been swept off the board. So they'll just be trying to elicit anything about this individual whatsoever, personally even, to put pressure on that person to embarrass America.
And in terms, from your extensive experience, from a propaganda perspective, so you've spoken about trying to get information from that crew member, but from a propaganda perspective, what will the Iranians be doing on that front?
Well, I foresee that they're going to put he or she in front of the cameras, which is a good thing, because that allows them, allows the individual to be known to the world, because the Iranians obviously are going to have to fess up if anything then happens to that individual, he or she. But I think potentially they might even go for some sort of trial, just to further embarrass the Americans, rather like Gary Powers in the early 60s and the shoot down there of the U-2 over Russia.
What type of what type of propaganda strategy will the Iranians try and leverage if the scenario is that crew member has been captured? In what way will they try and leverage the fact that they could possibly have a crew member from the US military in terms of negotiations and the bigger picture?
Essentially, what they'll do is, I believe, is hold that person to hostage. Simple as that. This is what we want. You could go onto the negotiating table and be part of the deal. All right, whatever is being talked about at this moment. And because, as we all know with the Americans, they never leave anybody behind. And we think of Michael Durant in Black Hawk Down, in Mogadishu, everybody came back, including him, although he was held hostage, captured and held hostage.
Is this if indeed the scenario is that a crew member has been captured, is this a strategic failure for the Trump administration?
Very much so, because if you remember what Trump has spoken about in the last few weeks, we have cleared this, we have done this, we have done that. But for the pilots who've actually had this situation forced upon them, what we call is a huge dislocation of expectations, Mikey. They are expecting to go in, not be compromised, but yet they've been shot down, which will be a huge shock to them.
Now, at a March 13th news briefing about the US-Israeli war with Iran, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth proclaimed, and I quote, "We will keep pushing, keep advancing, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies." Now, that phrase is widely understood to mean taking no prisoners or rejecting surrender and killing the prisoners instead. Do Hegseth's comments, in your view, put this second crew member, if indeed they are captured, at greater risk?
No, I don't believe they do put the person at risk. This individual, whoever he or she is of immense value to them, and they'll use that to beat the administration with. Simple as that. So all Heggis was on about was political grandstanding to his Magna base.
Got it. Fascinating insights. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Mikey.